Hey everyone! He-Who here from LeetCode. Today we're solving LeetCode 334, increasing triplet subsequence. This is a medium difficulty problem. And it comes under arrays and greedy in the LeetCode 75 study plan. At first glance, this sounds like a searching problem. Find three numbers in increasing order. Simple enough. But there's a clever observation hiding here. And once you see it, the solution becomes surprisingly elegant. Let's take a look. Here's the full problem statement. Take a moment to read through it. Pay special attention to the requirements. Notice that we're looking for a subsequence, not necessarily consecutive elements. The numbers can have other values between them, as long as their relative order remains the same. And there's another important detail. We're only asked to return true or false. We don't need to return the triplet itself. We only need to determine whether such a triplet exists. Now that we understand the problem, let's break it down with a few examples. Let's look at the first example. We're given the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Can we find three numbers in increasing order? Absolutely. We can simply choose 1, 2, and 3. The first value is smaller than the second, and the second value is smaller than the third. So the answer is true. Now let's look at another example. This time we're given 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Every value is smaller than the one before it, so an increasing triplet cannot exist. The answer becomes false. Now let's look at the most interesting example. We're given 2, 1, 5, 0, 4, and 6. The values move up and down, so the answer isn't immediately obvious. But if we look carefully, we can choose 0, 4, and 6. The first value is smaller than the second, and the second value is smaller than the third. So the answer is true. This reveals something important. We don't need the entire array to be increasing. We only need three values, appearing in the correct order. Now let's think about how we can find them efficiently. The most straightforward approach is simple. Try every possible triplet. Choose the first value. Then choose a second value that appears after it. Then choose a third value that appears after that. For every combination, check whether the values form an increasing sequence. If they do, return true immediately. Otherwise, keep searching. Eventually, if no valid triplet is found, return false. The idea works. But let's see how we would implement it. We'll use three nested loops. The first loop selects the first value. The second loop selects the second value. And the third loop selects the third value. Because each loop starts after the previous one, the order requirement is automatically satisfied. For every combination, we check two conditions. The first value should be smaller than the second, and the second value should be smaller than the third. If both conditions are true, we've found an increasing triplet, and we return true. If all combinations are checked, and none work, we return false. Simple, easy to understand, but not very efficient. Let's see why. Let's trace the brute force approach. We'll use the same example, 2, 1, 5, 0, 4, and 6. We begin with the first value. Then try every possible second value after it. For each pair, we try every possible third value. Most combinations fail, because the values are not in increasing order, so we keep checking. Eventually, we discover a valid triplet. The values are 2, 5, and 6. The first value is smaller than the second, and the second value is smaller than the third, so we return true. The approach works. But notice how many combinations we had to examine. Most of that work was unnecessary. Can we do better? Let's analyze the complexity. We use three nested loops. That gives us O of n cubed. Space complexity is O of 1. The solution is correct. But it's far too expensive, especially for large inputs. We need a smarter approach. Before jumping to a better solution, let's think about what the problem is really asking. Notice something important. The problem never asks us to return the triplet. We only need to know whether one exists. That changes how we think about the problem. Suppose we're scanning the array from left to right. What information do we actually need to remember? Let's say we've already found a small value. That could become the first element of a triplet. Later, we find a larger value. That could become the second element. Now we already have two pieces of a potential triplet. If we eventually encounter a value larger than both, then we're done. We've found a valid triplet. Interesting. That means we don't need to remember every possible sequence. We only need to remember the best candidates we've seen so far. Let's build on that idea. As we scan the array, we'll keep track of two values. The smallest value we've seen so far, and the smallest possible second value. Let's call them first and second. Whenever we find a smaller value, we update first. Whenever we find a value larger than first, but smaller than second, we update second. Now here's the key moment. If we ever find a value larger than second, then we automatically have a first value, a second value, and a third value, all in increasing order, which means an increasing triplet exists, and we can immediately return true. That's the entire idea. One pass, two variables. And a very clever observation. Now let's see the code. We'll initialize first and second to very large values. Then we'll scan the array once. For every value we check three possibilities. If the current value is smaller than or equal to first, we update first. Otherwise, if the current value is smaller than or equal to second, we update second. Notice that this value is already larger than first. So it becomes a candidate for the second position. Finally, if the current value is larger than both first and second, we've found an increasing triplet, and we return true immediately. If the loop finishes, then no valid triplet exists, so we return false. Let's trace the algorithm using the same example. 2, 1, 5, 0, 4, and 6. Initially, both candidates are set to infinity. The first value becomes our first candidate. So first becomes 2. Next we see a smaller value. So first becomes 1. Now we encounter 5. Since it's larger than first, it becomes our second candidate. So second becomes 5. Next we encounter 0. This is smaller than first. So first becomes 0. Notice that second remains unchanged. Now we encounter 4. It's larger than first, but smaller than second. So we improve our second candidate. Second becomes 4. Finally we encounter 6. It's larger than first, and it's also larger than second. That means we now have three values in increasing order. 0, 4, and 6. So we immediately return true. Exactly what we wanted. Let's analyze the complexity. We scan the array only once. So the time complexity is O of n, space complexity is O of 1. We're only using two extra variables. That's a huge improvement over the brute force solution. Let's quickly recap the key idea. We don't need to find the actual triplet. We only need to know whether one exists. So instead of tracking every possible combination, we track only two candidates. The smallest value seen so far, and the smallest possible second value. If we ever encounter a value larger than both, we've found an increasing triplet. Time complexity O of n, space complexity O of 1. And that's the main lesson from this problem. Sometimes the smartest solution comes from storing less information, not more. And that's how we solve LeetCode 334, increasing triplet subsequence. If you found this explanation helpful, make sure to like the video and subscribe to LeetCode. Thanks for watching. This is Hugh, signing off. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next one.